Hope it works. Oh, I wonder if this works from this far out either. Another question. Okay, so business intelligence. So first of all, you might be wondering, why is it that, by the way, did I just make a terrible glare on the screen for that? It's okay, it's visible enough. All right, so why are we doing a class on business intelligence, and how did we get to a 7-week class? You might be wondering that, and why are we starting in the middle of the semester? So we in the MBA program are in the process of transferring all of our courses over to an 8-week format so that students have more convenience, so that they can take 1 or 2 intensive classes for 8 weeks and then take another intensive class for 8 weeks, rather than having 2 or 3 classes that are stretching over the entire semester where they're balancing all the demands of the various different classes. So hopefully you're in this class and you don't have a lot of other classes right now. But if you have, some regular classes plus this one is starting on top of it, it could be that, you have a pretty heavy load at this point. So I'm sorry about that. We have not entirely gotten our act together as far as all the scheduling goes. But the idea was that you would be able to take 601 business analytics first and then take 644 business intelligence all in the same semester. And that would help people to get through the program faster. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing this the way that we're doing it. The consequences are that we have a limited amount of time to do a lot of stuff. And what I've done is I've tried to take from the class the very best of the material that I have, eliminate some stuff that may not have been of primary importance, and also rethink some of the assignments so that they're actually doable in the amount of time that we have. Because, typically I would give a couple of initial assignments and then I would give a longer group project. And if I give a longer group project, by the time I do that, the semester is practically over at this point, right? So I have to be realistic about that, and I can't ask you to do more than you're actually physically able to do. Even if you want to do it, I imagine that I'll find when I read your surveys that many of you are working full time, or that you have a significant number of hours that you're working. So that's a little bit of the philosophy. On the website, I tried to kind of follow the best practices in terms of introducing myself, having a course orientation, having a file that points you to the direction of the resources. I'm trying to make sure that I put in each module your instructions on what you're supposed to do. You're going to try to make it a little bit more like an online course in the sense that it's as structured as it needs to be so that you have everything at your fingertips. So if you're ever uncertain about what you're supposed to do at any point in time in the class, or you're not finding something that you think you should be finding, then please ask me immediately. If there's a resource that you think should be there and it's not there, it's not opening up or something like that, please let me know immediately. I do pretty much at this point in the year, I'm working 7 days a week on all of my teaching activities, at least to a certain extent on the weekends. So I will be checking my phone, I'll be checking my emails. I've also given you my cell number. So as long as you're calling or texting me within reason, I say like 7:30 a.m. to 10:30 at night. If you're texting me, please make sure that you identify who you are so I know, it's hard to tell sometimes who a text is from. And if you're calling me, I'll let the call come through. And then obviously you're going to introduce me. So my philosophy is that if I can help you at the point of need, deliver the knowledge or information that you need at the point of need, then it's going to save you a lot of time and anguish at that point. And so that is definitely something that I want to try to do. I think I said in the syllabus that I was making a commitment to respond within 24 hours, but I really try to respond within an hour if possible, if I'm working at that time. But there may be times when I'm in meetings or other things when that's just not possible. As far as my background goes, I've been teaching more than 30 years at this point, so that's an awfully long time, if you can imagine. I go back to the days, my very first class was I walked into the classroom and there was a blackboard with chalk, and that was it. I was reading from notes. And so things have evolved a long way in that time. I started my career studying Soviet computing, if you can imagine. That was my undergraduate senior thesis topic. My master's topic was about the use of computers in the Soviet energy industry, and then my PhD thesis was about how the Soviet Union was using computers across the general economy with the stopping at the military idea. So you might say, how in the world did I end up, teaching a class like this? The point is that actually business intelligence, we'll see in the definition in a minute here, is really very much like what we say is how organizations use computers. It really isn't all that different. And so I can say that the last 30 years, really the core of what I've been studying is how do organizations use computers. And a lot has changed, but some things have changed, have not changed as much as you might think. So beyond that, I have a background in knowledge management and in knowledge management systems. So to study the Soviet computing, one of the things that we did was we actually built our own text management system that was, it was good enough that it was considered at one time by the CIA for adoption, but we lost out to a commercial vendor that was willing to charge them millions and millions of dollars. They thought we were probably too cheap as an academic unit. They had to go out and spend lots of money. And as far as I understand, their system never worked that well. I don't know if that's true or not, but a little bitterness there. But in any case, probably the best, all for the best. We just stayed in some more obscurity at that point. But anyway, that gave me some experience with all of the aspects of knowledge management systems. And so beyond that, I've studied things like the global diffusion of the internet when that was a really hot topic. And then in the 2000s, I got back into studying what was happening in Russia with their offshore software industry. So I have a global interest, and I also have a local interest. I was just one of the principals involved in putting on our Business Analytics Innovation Summit. We had 6 excellent speakers from local companies. And so I would say that, I'm pretty well positioned to teach a class like this at this point. My background is information systems. I know a lot of you are supply chain people. I don't think that the fact that I'm information systems is going to make that much difference to you. I think you'll find that this is more or less a universal type of a topic for any business major. Some of you are just general MBAs. Some of you, a very small number of you, are information systems students at this point. So if you know any more, invite them to come for information systems. So with all of those introductions out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and tell you what I want to talk about tonight. So I want to set the stage for the course material by asking why do we have this massive interest in business intelligence, analytics, visualizations, all of these things in today's world. And so I think a lot of this story may be somewhat familiar to you, but I'd like to just lay it out there anyway so that you see it. If you did take the 601 class with me, you will see that there's some overlap because there has to be some overlap in the topic areas that we have. But we'll then be going off in our own direction in this class. So I want to start off by talking about that. And then I want to stop and just give a little bit of an overview of what's happening in this course so you know what to expect and you can ask me some questions about what the expectations are. As far as to what extent should you take notes? Should you try to learn every last little detail and everything in the class? I do have learning objectives that I posted in each module, so that kind of gives you a sense of what questions I might ask. As we'll see when I talk about the assignments, there's one in-class quiz type event, quiz/exam, if you want to think about it that way. So that means that I do want to hold you accountable to learning some of these concepts in a way that you can use them during a formal official quiz/exam type of an event. But that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to learn every last detail because I'm going to give you lots of examples, and the examples are not things that you would memorize, but I'm wanting you to learn concepts and then see how to apply them in reality. So those are so do you need to take a note on every last thing I say? Probably not, but try to focus in on the concepts. And then The final exam will be a take-home, so that will be open notes, open book, for that. So you'll be able to use any of the materials from the class as you see. So in any case, back to the agenda. So then I'll talk about then we'll have a break. Then we'll talk about visualizations, which is a major topic of this class. Partly because there's been a lot of demand for it. I've gotten a lot of feedback from people who've said, the one thing that I got out of your class that was the most useful to me in the job world or the job search was what we did with Tableau. So I want to continue to offer that to you. But there have been other people who have said the knowledge management component of this class have been very valuable to them as well. So what I want you to see is how the big picture of how doing something like a visualization fits into the larger scheme of how organizations create and use knowledge. And so with a focus on that, we'll also focus on how organizations get benefits from business intelligence. And hopefully we will have time towards the end of tonight to talk about the case of Guess, which is a clothing manufacturer. By the way, is it still in existence right now? Anybody know if you can buy Guess clothes? It is. It hasn't gone out of business yet. I mean, that's the thing is there's so many clothing companies that are going bankrupt or out of business. I didn't have a chance to check before class, the Wall Street Journal, just to see whether or not, in the last week or something, it went out of business. Okay, so that's the agenda. Any questions so far? As far as needing the computers go, next week we will use Tableau extensively. And so that's one of the reasons why we're in this lab. And the next 2 weeks after that, we'll also have time in class to work with Tableau. Sort of after that, we probably, well, in the 5th week, you'll be doing some presentations. The 6th and 7th week, we probably won't be doing anything with these computers. So it's kind of a toss-up as to whether or not we really needed to have the class in this room, but they offered it, and I said, it's pretty cool. Maybe if they can get the technology working, it'll be even more cool. Let's see what happens. Okay, so let's start off. We all know a bad chart when we see it, don't we? I'd like to hear from you. What do you think about this chart? What makes it a bad chart? I'm actually going to get a marker here, and let's list some things on the board. Do you notice that this board has absolutely no light on it? Nice feature of the room. Let's just say clearly, there were no professors involved in designing this room. So. Anyway, what makes this a bad chart?
Unnecessary grid lines.
Okay, so get rid of grid. Get rid of grid. Okay. This is not a good marker. So that's another thing. They offer me supposedly brand new markers that are not. Okay, what else? So in other words, you're saying if we say get rid of grid, that's in a category. So that broader category, we might say aesthetics, aesthetic aspects of the grid. Okay, I'm sorry, of the visualization. What else? What makes it a bad visualization? Everybody agree it's bad? Anybody think it's good? Okay.
Access is very strongly blocking.
Yes, so we can't really even tell so as far as the content goes, I'm writing the word content on the board, and then I'm saying we can't tell what is the x-axis necessarily. Can we tell what's on the y-axis? It looks like we have a scale of some sort on there. Okay, yes? Yeah, so units, we have no units, we have, what's the y? Although the y, we probably, oh yeah, that's right, we don't have the y. I was getting the y and x confused there for a minute. So yeah, we know a little bit more about the x. I'm sorry, go ahead.
For the display of this information, there was no 3D requirement on this because there was no y-axis in first.
Oh, well, there is a y-axis, but the question is, why do we need to have three-dimensional on this? So that's another aesthetic, no need for 3D on that. Okay. Anything else? Do we know what it's? Yes. Yeah. We actually have there's not enough information on here to really actually tell essentially why does this graph exist at all, right? So under the content, we have the big why question. What's it about? We don't really know. So that's enough to get us started, right? So one of the things that I want to do in this class is I want to focus in on what makes a visualization good or bad, and get you to make good ones. You know, so it's actually harder than you think it is, and it's easy to make mistakes in terms of the aesthetics or in terms of the content. So later on, I'll show you my version of this and see if you like the way that I fixed it. Okay, what is business intelligence? So here's a definition from Thomas Davenport. So Davenport, let's see, do I have a thing here? A pointer. Okay, I don't think I have that. All right, so Thomas Davenport, he's a big name in the field of business analytics, very well known. He's one of the people who started the field. And in fact, you'll see that I assigned for you an article he wrote way back in the year 2001. So he started at becoming prominent in when people were talking about business process reengineering before the analytics craze. He says business intelligence is a set of technologies and processes that use data to understand and analyze business performance. So that's the bottom line, is we want to see how is a business doing. So we have to understand what is the business process that we're analyzing, and then how can we use data to figure that out, right? So the data can be, we can use all sorts of extremely sophisticated techniques in order to analyze the data, or we can use very basic techniques. You know, God forbid we should use a graph like that, but we can use visualizations in order to help us to analyze the data. I'm sorry if you went all the way to Polski. Yeah, I should have put a note over there. So ordinarily I would have, but I was trying to make sure this room was set up. So for those who went to Polski, I apologize for that. What I want to point out about this definition is this covers all of business. You know, if you think about it, just about anything that you do with technology and with data could be considered to be part of business intelligence. So it's a definition that covers so much. So we have to focus in this class. We have to narrow down our focus a little bit so that we're not trying to cover everything. But generally, I would say, you know, the focus is on getting the benefits. And so improving our business processes by using the means of business intelligence. A little bit later, I'll also draw a contrast between this and business analytics and another word that's not used, collaboratics, which is in collaboration technologies. Okay, so why is it different now? We say our management processes have always used data. And I have here the creator of the first time series line graph, bar chart, and pie chart, William Playfair. Anybody familiar with the history of William Playfair? He came to the United States, and then ultimately he was considered to be a traitor to the United States, and he was one of the early people who was charged with treason. So he actually had a rather checkered history in the United States. But before that, in England, he created, you know, some very interesting graphs. So why is it different now? What is the management process? What is a business process? The generic idea of thinking of a business process is we plan, we execute, we see what the outcome is, and then we revise if necessary. And we're always doing that, even when we have an algorithm. Your algorithm tonight was to go to 491 Polski, but I imagine that next week you will revise and you'll change your plan because you saw what the outcome was, right? Yes. Yes, this is a whole new $4 million edition here, except for the fact that we really don't have decent lights that can be dimmed, and we don't have the front screen. We're on our way. We'll see what happens. So, so we use data, we use decision support systems in order to help us figure out how to revise, in order to figure out, you know, at what point in time we can take measurements of our business process. You know, so you might say, we've been doing this forever. You know, managers, people on the military battlefield, people for governments, Everybody has been doing this forever, taking managements, getting reports, coming back of what's actually happening. So what has actually changed? And so what's changed is, first of all, is that we have a major emphasis on using data, right? So now it's becoming the norm that we have evidence-based management. So instead of just making gut instinct decisions, and so people will say, yes, there is still a role for gut decisions, that, there's certain things that we can't find in data, that we can't express that way, but there's a whole lot that we can, of decisions that we can make on the basis of data. And so dashboards are very popular these days, that have all sorts of data on them that allow you to instantly see what is the state of affairs in the organization. And I would say that would be shocked if the organizations that you work for are not emphasizing evidence-based or data-based decision-making at this point in time. So it doesn't make sense. And why do we need that? Because we have cognitive deficiencies as human beings. And again, economists have been studying this very rigorously for the last 30 or 40 years. And if you look at the list of cognitive deficiencies that humans have, you'll see it's very long at this point in terms of ones that have been documented by experiments and things. But these are some of the most prevalent ones. We tend to believe the most recent things we've heard. And so data helps us overcome that. We tend to find causality where it doesn't exist. We see a pattern, we see a graph. And so we need to make sure that we're rigorous in the way that we use data. We have a tendency to confirm things that we quote unquote know are true already. That's called confirmation bias. And so we have to allow the data to speak for itself and not necessarily warp it in one direction or another. We think we know more than we really do. I mean, the experiments on this have been very devastating, especially the people who are at the bottom in terms of how much they know. They are the ones that actually think they know the most. So it is something that we have to overcome as well. And we engage in groupthink. I had a very interesting experience this summer. I went to a 2-week class on learning how to teach online, which was very enlightening to me and taught me about a lot of different technologies. And they had an exercise early on where they gave half the class a word puzzle where you had to unscramble a word and make a word out of it, an anagram. And then half the class got a word that was nonsense. You couldn't unscramble it. There were no words associated with it. I was one of the people who got that. And the first time around, the minute or two went up and I was thinking, oh man, I can't believe I couldn't get this and everything. And I had to leave the answer blank. And the second time they did it, I was really frustrated and I wrote in the blank and I said, cannot solve. And the third time, I was ready to put my hand up and agree with the rest of the class that yes, I'd gotten the answer, because I was so embarrassed, that I couldn't get the right answer. And then they revealed, of course, that there was no right answer. And that was to make me feel as a professor what students feel like sometimes if they can't get the right answer, So that was a good point of empathy for me. But it was also interesting because it reminded me of how powerful groupthink is, to go along with the group rather than sticking to your own opinion about what's going on for that. And there are several others, so you can read lists of all of these. So evidence-based management is absolutely critical in today's world, even more so than ever. And we now have big data, right? So what is big data? Again, this is probably covering familiar ground for you, but big data we talk about in terms of volume of data. Usually we say that big data is data that can't be managed by conventional information systems. We need to have, a large amount of servers and farms of disk drives and distributed places where we're storing the data. For that, we're talking about anything from terabytes of data all the way up to zettabytes. And then we talk about the variety of data, structured data, being something that we could put into a database. So for example, the writing on this bottle of water, Deer Park, these letters, we can put letters easily into a database, but how to describe the shape of the bottle. We can describe it in words or the color of the bottle, the way that the water is moving around here. If we take a photograph of the bottle, it takes a lot of steps to get that in a form that a computer can actually process it. Delicious water. So we distinguish between structured and unstructured data, and we also distinguish between how fast the data is coming at us. Do we process it in batches? So for example, I have all your surveys that I've gotten, and I want to use those surveys to help me make groups for the class. That is unless you tell me that you don't want me to do it that way, but I'm kind of assuming that since you filled out the survey, you're good with that idea. So the idea of the survey is that I'll use your grids, that is to say when you're available, and some information about your skill sets, put it through what I call a genetic algorithm, and then it will come up with the best, quote unquote, the best groups. Hopefully we'll make that work. But I'm not processing that as the data comes in. So that's a batch processing. But if I opened up and looked at your survey, every survey as it came in and did something with it, that would be streaming processing of the data. Right? So in many places now, we have streaming data that gets processed immediately. So those are three characteristics of what big data is all about. I think in class 4, we're going to talk about digital data streams. We're going to talk about more about all the streaming data that's out there and how companies are taking advantage of that. One topic that I used to talk about in the class was text mining, but because of how much time we have in this slightly shortened version of the class, I probably won't talk about that, but it falls under the variety thing. But let's talk about the volume. So what is a gigabyte? That's 10 to the 9th, that's 1 billion bytes. A terabyte is billion quadrillion. A petabyte is 1 quintillion. And then after that, I don't know how to say. I just like to use the powers of 10 here, which are pretty much along the lines of what the real numbers are for that. So how many people have heard of an exabyte before? Okay, how about a petabyte? Okay, so not too familiar with big data at this point. How about terabytes? Okay, so terabytes you may know about because that's the next one after gigabytes, and I'm guessing that a number of you have terabyte storage devices in your homes or you have them at work. How many people have a terabyte or more of their own storage? Okay, so how many people have no idea how much storage you have? Okay, so few are in that category in the class because you may not have that much need for it, or you may have it in the cloud, and so it doesn't really matter to you how much is out there. But companies these days are managing terabytes to petabytes, depending on how large they are. Any large corporation is managing petabytes of data at this point in time, and so that's considered to be somewhat large data. Let's see how it's evolved a little bit. So from the beginning of recorded time to 2003, according to an IBM estimate, we created 5 exabytes worth of data. So you can see, compared to what you may be familiar with, let's say you have a 250 gigabyte drive on your computer. So 4 of those drives on your computer would be 1 terabyte, and this is 6 orders of magnitude bigger than that, if you want to think about how much that is. So that's how much we created from the beginning of recorded history to 2003, supposedly. Now, moving up to 2011, we created 5 exabytes every 2 days. Moving up to 2013, we created 5 exabytes every 2 hours. And it gives you a sense of how things are changing. By 2021, according to Cisco, we will have data center storage capacity installed that allow us to store 2.6 zettabytes. So that's, again, the next level, 1,000 times the exabyte. And 403 of these will be considered to be data sets that are in the form of big data. So we went from 5 exabytes in 2 hours in 2011 up to 2021, 403 exabytes of big data that we're going to be storing. The massive, massive quantities of data. And the final estimate is that the amount that we have on our devices will be even more than what's in the data centers, 5.9 zettabytes. And then overall, according to Cisco, by 2021, we will reach 847 zettabytes when we take into consideration all of the little devices, the Internet of Things, that are going to be talking to each other. You know, everything in the room will be talking to each other. You know, you won't even have to worry about walking to the wrong classroom because your phone will be telling your brain or something that, you know, go the other way at this point. Even if we even have classrooms by then, who knows what we'll have. But anyway, so the estimates are that nothing is going to change about the trends. We're not going to suddenly stop making more and more data. It's just going to get more and more and bigger at this point. So big data is going to be around, and it's going to be an issue for all corporations to deal with managing it. Okay, what about the unstructured data? So the quintessential example of unstructured data is photographs. And so the most recent number I could find was that we created 1.2 trillion photographs in 2017. By the way, are you having trouble? How many people are having trouble managing your photographs? Your library's online, you know. So I'm surprised more people didn't raise their hands. Maybe you know more about it than I do, but it seems like I take all these photos, I put them someplace on my hard disk, and then I never look at them again. I don't even really know what's there because I have so many of them. You know, so maybe you have smart photo albums that actually pick out the best ones for you. I guess that technology does exist. We have a massive amount of unstructured content that we're not using at this point in time. And we have to consider about what are the different types of data. Most organizations, and this was a little bit old data from 2015, at that time they said 83% of the organizations in that survey considered structured data initiatives to be critical or high priority versus 43% were working on unstructured data. So obviously there's a prevalence to working for structured data. Then 32% did not have managing unstructured data on their to-do lists. I'm sure that that's diminished at this point in time. But then only 18% of enterprises or 12% of small enterprises viewed cold data. And I really am using this slide as a way to remind you what do we mean by cold data. So cold data is old that we may or may not want to use at some point in the future. We have to dig it out. You know, so I'll give you an example about some cold data. So a friend of mine works for a machine tool company in Cuyahoga Falls. And so they had a slow period. About 2 years ago, the economy, they're kind of a lagging indicator in the economy. And so even though things were heating up, their business hadn't really recovered that much from the crash. And so they started to clean out all of their old files and everything and throw data away. Well, just throw stuff away. You know, so they had blueprints for torpedo casings that they had made in the 1960s for submarines. Maybe it was 1970s. And so, but they were 20, 30, 40 years old. And that's cold data. It was in the form of blueprints that were sitting in a filing cabinet. And the question is, are you going to scan them in? Are you going to put them into some kind of CAD/CAM system? What are you going to do with this old engineering data that you have sitting around? So what do you think they did with it? They threw it away. And literally within another month, they got an inquiry about whether or not they could resume producing those casings. Why was that? Because of the fact that the submarines, those torpedoes were reaching the end of their life cycle, and now the US government was saying, oh my God, what are we going to do to replace some of them? Didn't actually end up going that direction. So, but I couldn't believe it when he told me that they'd thrown away literally weeks before they'd gotten that inquiry. So that's cold data. Do you ever know when knowledge is going to be valuable for you again? And that's one of the reasons why we're coming about, 847 zettabytes, because nobody wants to throw anything away. Right? We think that there might be some use for the data, and yet a lot of this cold data is simply dirty. It's unusable. It's in a form which we can't use. You know, a lot of companies are paying people, like it could be like you, to go out and take data that's in paper form and type it in to the computer. I had a former student who took this class, and another one of our classes, graduated from our program. She just wrote me an email, and she said that she'd gone through some hard times, didn't have a job in her field at that moment, but she took a job with Signet Jewelers, and she was literally typing in data for them as a temp. But the interesting thing, and that was a 30-day contract or something, so she's making some money. But as she typed this data into their system and learned all about their jewelry business, she actually had some ideas on how they could do their marketing better. She sent them to her boss. Her boss liked them so much that they offered her a job. So, and guess what she's going to be doing? Making Tableau dashboards, among other things, right? So she's going to use directly the skills that she got. I was overjoyed to hear that. But that's cold data. So organizations have to make decisions about whether or not they're going to use that. We have storage. By the way, I just noticed an interesting feature of this room. You see how they put the TVs higher than the lights? So that actually, I don't know from your perspective, it cuts it off, but when I'm looking at this screen back here, the top of the screen is cut off by the light. Aye, aye, aye. Okay, so punch list. Maybe, you know, but I'm pretty short these days, so. Oh, is that what they are? Okay. All right, well, anyway, so we have lots of storage. So there are 500 hyperscale data centers around the world. I don't know if anybody was familiar with that concept. What is a hyperscale data center? It has more than 5,000 servers and more than 929 square meters of space. That's kind of the definition for it. It can house up to millions of servers in it. And right now we are spending about $25 billion of capital expenditures investment per quarter around the world to increase the number of hyperscale global data centers. This is the distribution around the world. You can see the US currently has about 44%, China has about 8%, Japan 6%, UK 6%. You know, so the US still has a big lead in this, but you know, it could shrink over time. But it is a very, very big lead. You know, so think about all the energy that these centers are using. Think how vulnerable that makes a country. You know, I like to think about geopolitical ideas. And certainly if someone could figure out a way to knock out a bunch of those data centers in the US, that would definitely be harmful. Don't say that I said it, you know, in the class, give anybody any ideas. So we have storage. We have data warehouses. So what is a data warehouse? We'll come back and talk about this a little bit more next week, but it is a place where we collect and store, clean, and importantly, we regularize the data. We make it available for visualizations for other types of analyses. So you can see here, we have our source systems, we have customer relationship management, we have ERP, which is kind of the general system for running the operations of the business, and other data sources, and we process them in such a way that they are available then in a regular fashion for all of the analyses that we're doing on that. So most companies of any size have data warehouses of some sort, and they are making the data available to analysts that way. But a new trend that's come up in the last, you know, so maybe about 10 years or so is the rise of data lakes. So how many have heard the term data lake before? Okay, so not too many in the room. So a data lake is a place where we throw stuff that we may need later, and we don't really bother to put it in that organized a form. You know, it's organized enough so we know where it is and we can get it back out, but we don't do the processing on it immediately. We wait until we see if we need it, and then if we need it, we pull it out and process it in the ways that we need to process it at that time. So let's say that a company has a website and they're keeping track of every click or every mouse over certain parts of a web page. Can you imagine how much data that generates in a day for millions of people coming to your website? So if you don't necessarily know how you're going to use that, but you think at some point down the road you're going to need that data, you throw it into a data lake. And then if it's valuable, it's pulled out, it's managed, it may go into your analytics platform, it may go into your data warehouse at this point. So that's part of the basic architecture of business intelligence, is either data going into data warehouses or data going into data lakes. And that's different than the operational systems. You know, the previous slide, something like a customer relationship management system, what we're doing there is we're putting in a record of an interaction that we had, let's say, with a customer, a potential sales that we might have, and keeping track of the details. Oh, this guy said that he has 3 kids and a dog, and so the next person who calls says, how's your dog doing? You know, and oh, it's such a friendly company. How did they know that I had the dog? You know, so that's operational. But the fact that the person has the dog, that might go into the data warehouse in a certain form that would then be used to aggregate that data and use it in an analytical application where we might say, ah, yes, dog is a feature that predicts whether or not someone is going to buy dog food or whatever industry you're in for that. Okay, so that's later in the process. But the initial storage of the data is just for making the sale for that. Okay, so we have analytics. Visualization is a growing field. Lots of universities have data visualization classes. From time to time, we've talked about whether or not we should simply have a class called data visualization here, either at the undergraduate or graduate level. It's part of a lot of different curricula. Companies are adding visual analyst positions. Do any of you have visual analyst positions at your companies, out of curiosity? Okay, so one example there. July 17th, Facebook had that kind of position. A hedge fund had it. Deloitte, a consulting firm, had it, consulting accounting. And I think I have a new slide here that I just put in that I did over the weekend from Indeed.com. I looked for data visualization jobs. I found 24,000 jobs listed on Indeed.com. If you hone in into the Cleveland area, you will still see at least hundreds of jobs with that title. You can see that there's some nice salary ranges there. So companies are indeed putting an emphasis on it. One of the companies that we had at the Business Analytics Summit was Signet Jewelers, the very company that hired my former student. And they have an entire group that is focusing on using Tableau to provide visualizations for other units in the company. And they're hiring data visualization specialists in that unit. So you can find jobs in that area. Okay, so abundant tools. We have heavyweight visualization tools. A lot of these tools that you're seeing here, like business objects or visual analytics with SAS or Spotfire, Cognos, they started out as independent companies. And they were companies that were just providing visualization tools. And one by one, they've gotten bought up by the very biggest software vendors. So SAP is the biggest provider of ERP. Oracle also is the number 2 provider of ERP software and database software. IBM obviously is one of the largest companies around. Microsoft has its Power BI tools. So you may find in the environment that you're working in that the analytics and visualization tools are well integrated into a whole set, massive software suites. There are also what I call end user visualization tools that are not necessarily part of other packages. Like the biggest one until recently is Tableau, and then there's Click and a few of these other ones here that I've listed on here. Okay, this is my video about Tableau. I thought that I had something about the fact that Tableau was bought out. Okay, well, that probably comes next. So here's a preview of what Tableau can do. How many people are already familiar with Tableau? Okay, how many people are familiar with any of the other tools that we have on here? Click or any of the rest? Okay, not many. Okay, so we're going to be providing you with a lot of new information for you in this class. That's excellent. So here's Tableau.
You need answers? Ask your data. No, seriously, just ask your data. It's pretty easy, really. And everyone will do it. He can ask it to help find new opportunities. Or he can ask it to check out the competition. You can ask pretty much anything. Okay, not that. Well, maybe that. She can ask it to evaluate market position. And ask it to help figure out if it's going to be a great. You can even ask it how to bring in the professionals. So, any questions? Ask it. Answers for Tableau.
Okay, I think Tableau has gone to a monthly release or a frequent release cycle. So they're actually on 2019.3, I believe, right now, although the person who installed Tableau on the computer today installed 2019.2. I don't think it makes that much difference for this class which version, if you're on 19.1, 2, or 3. The only thing is some are not backward compatible with others, so you might find that Tableau will give you a message that says if you save it in this format, then you can't go backwards on that. So it's the only thing to watch out for. But I don't think we're really going to use all those advanced features, although I don't want to limit you. So when you do visualizations for the class, I'm more than happy if you figure out how to use some of the most recent things. So what that was demonstrating is a capability of writing your ideas about what you want Tableau to do in English words and then having it translate those into an actual visualization for that. So we'll see if we can talk about how that actually works as part of our class. But as I mentioned briefly, Salesforce is eating up Tableau. So Salesforce is one of the largest software as a service providers that does customer relationship management software, among other things. And they're buying it for $15.7 billion. The deal was closing just this month. So, that gives you an idea of how valuable these visualization tools are. And but we are using Tableau with the Tableau for Teaching program. It's been around for at least probably 15 years at this point. I think I started teaching Tableau maybe as far back as 2006 or 7, something like that. And it is maybe on version 4, I think. Now we're up to this version here. So let's hope they keep that program alive and keep providing you with free software, as I think it's extremely valuable for you to have that. So this is what do you think about this graph? You like this one? I think we can add a few bad things about it to the one on the board. So what's the number one thing that's bad about this? Wait, could you speak up? Yeah, too many data points. That's right. They're just trying to show everything. So this is technologies and initiatives that are strategic to business intelligence, and they're listing every last one that they had in the survey, and they're showing us what the distribution of responses were going from critical all the way down to not important on here. So yeah, if you analyze this line by line by line, you can get a lot of information out of it. But for displaying to a room, it's way too much information. So we really want to focus in on what are the most critical things. And what I wanted to emphasize to get out of this for you is the most critical things are dashboards, advanced visualization, end user self-service, data warehousing, data discovery. So again, it's information like this that informs why I made some of the choices that I'm making about what I think should be the contents of this class. And I put in the slides here some references if you want to look at classic books about visualizations. These are some of the best authors: Tufte, Cleveland, Few. And then this one here, if you're looking for a way that you can do visualizations using R, and we actually will have a short article about how the BBC is doing that next week. This Kieran Healy book is an excellent step-by-step about using R. So if you want to give yourself a shot in the arm for your organization and bring in a free software platform for visualization, this might be a very good way to go. I personally think it's a little bit too far to try to bring R into a class like this because there's just so much overhead getting started with it. Okay, so you're in demand. In 2011, there was a report out from, I think it was McKinsey Global Institute, that said that we had a shortage of 190,000 data scientists in the US and 1.5 million managers and analysts who could analyze data and make decisions. So this was actually behind a lot of programs, including our program, adding analytics tracks to our programs, or even analytics master's degrees. In the end of 2016, McKinsey came out with another report, and they said, oh, by the way, we need 2 to 4 million business translators. And what is a business translator? The link between analytical talent and practical applications to business questions. So people who are in that position. So that's, again, if you want to know where I'm thinking of the pitch of this class, it is more towards the idea of a business analyst, not towards a data scientist, but someone who has some significant business information but also wants to use technology tools for that. And these business translators are data savvy. That is to say, you understand how to manipulate data, stuff about where it comes from. You have a lot of organization and industry knowledge, and you can ask the data science team the right questions and get insights from their findings. And so to boil it down, you have proprietary knowledge about the business, and you're deeply embedded in the organization. That's how to protect yourself from what's happening from the bottom up, which is analytics taking away some of the routine elements of jobs. And as analytics takes away routine elements of jobs, certain people will be attrited out of the company. You know, attrition, that means to say not rehiring when someone leaves. Some will be let go. Positions won't be refilled, and those that remain will be ones who are higher up in the knowledge hierarchy. Proprietary knowledge deeply embedded. So again, as you're planning your careers, think about ways that you can continually moving up the knowledge ladder so that you're ready for what's happening from below with routine work. 2016 survey, talent and skills continue to be at a premium. 43% in this survey said the lack of technical skills or staffing most commonly barrier to implementation for analytics and big data. So again, where I see your role, you may be analysts, you may be focusing more on business skills, you may be focusing more on data skills, probably not down in the level of the information technology people. Maybe a few people in the class are down here focusing on the actual nuts and bolts of information systems. There may be a few of you who are already more in the realm of managers. I've had a considerable range of people in the class over the years for this. And this one is, again, where do companies get skills from? So the number one place is hiring people from outside the company. So again, although it says hiring from universities is the lowest there, companies are being forced to hire outside talent with analytics. So any way that you can get experience with analytics is going to help you in the job market at this point. By the way, do you like this form of the graph better or this form? So this form or that form? Which one do you like better? Number one? How many people like number one better? What makes it better? Lists them in the way that we are likely to read from top to bottom rather than having to read across. What else is different? Wait, okay, I need one person at a time, though. That's the thing, is I need to enforce a discipline of hand raising because my hearing, I can't tell where sounds are coming from. So let's go over here.
Going from largest to smallest.
Right, we sorted it, right? So we did a simple convenience for the user of just putting the bars in order so that we could get a sense, so we can do more analysis easily rather than having to figure it out in our own brain. So I made this one in Tableau based on that one that came from the original source. So you can spend a surprisingly large amount of time on stuff like that, by the way. And then companies are preferring to hire people who have analytical skills. This was a division made by an MIT Sloan Management Review report. This one says 2015. They still use those three categories in later reports by the same people based on yearly survey data. Analytically challenged companies are not likely to hire that many people who have analytical skills. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to attract those people. It's the analytical innovators, the people who are ahead, that are hiring the people with most analytical skills. So look for companies that you can identify as analytical innovators for places where you might get jobs for that. And I mentioned the idea that routine cognitive work is flat, as far as jobs in that area, or even declining a little bit. This graph goes all the way from 1983 up to 2013. And then see which you like this time, number one or number two. It's like I'm giving you glasses. Number one or number two? You like this one better? Number two or number one? Number two? So the Y on number two is because it clearly shows the trends. We've got a zero line going across, so we can clearly see which two are going down. The routine cognitive and routine manual, and which two are going up, non-routine, in both areas. So that's, again, one more nudge to you to not be complacent about the skill set that you have, to continue to strive to get jobs that are non-routine elements in the job. So, okay, let's take a few minutes to talk about the class, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll talk about some of the major themes. I think I'm more or less on time right now. It's another thing. You notice that the room has no clock? Okay. So they just want the class to go on forever. That's what they want. Okay, so on the required readings, so there is a packet from Harvard. It costs $22. So it is true that you can probably find some of these articles elsewhere, but I thought that in general it would just be more convenient for you to pay a little bit of money and get them all in one packet. There is one case study, though, that you should not be able to get anywhere else that is included in this, and that we'll be discussing, I think, in class 7 on this. So you might want to go ahead and buy them. I think they're valuable articles. 2 of them are about visualizations, and I think they're worth having. Most of the readings that I'm assigning, I'm providing for you on Brightspace. That's all free of charge. Then there are 2 books. So the Learning Tableau book, I have geared some of the learning objectives to that book. And but again, it's entirely up to you what Tableau book. If you want to use a Tableau book, if you don't want to use a Tableau book, because there's tons of materials available for Tableau. You can register on their website, you can watch their videos, you can watch videos on YouTube, you can look at a whole bunch of different blogs. So I just put one there because it's organized, it goes chapter by chapter, it builds up each concept area, it has good examples, and it's free through our library. So the only thing you have to do is it's from Safari, you have to register on the Safari website. The first time you go to the book, you just have to create a username and password. And the other bad thing about it is it doesn't have any page numbers in it. So you kind of have to scroll through each little chapter part. So it's slightly less convenient than having a real book. So if you want to have a real book, just spend a few dollars and buy that book or buy a Tableau book for yourself if you learn that way. Big Book of Dashboards, that one I've assigned just the first chapter of. And then the rest of the book is 3 visualization experts that each have taken examples of dashboards that they've made, and they discuss their pros and cons. What was the business case? And then they each criticize each other's work in chapter after chapter after chapter. So originally I was thinking of assigning more of those for this class, and I decided I probably don't have time to do that. But it is a very worthwhile resource, especially if you're trying to develop a dashboard in an area and you want some ideas. You can open up that book and see, oh, how did they do it? What are some good ideas there? So we may come back to that book a little bit more. I also have a third book that I didn't list here that's in I think it's in the learning objectives for Module 2. It's from Christopher Adamson. It's called the Star Schema Complete Reference. And it's more of a data modeling book that kind of gives some of the underlying principles. So for that, I've recommended that you read the first 3 chapters of that book. It's not, real heavy-duty reading. It's not like reading philosophy or something like that. I think it'll be useful to give you a foundation in data modeling, which we'll be talking about next week. Okay, on the assignment. So the way that I have structured this class is the first part of the semester we'll be doing some group work. So I like doing groups for visualizations because I think you can really benefit from critiquing each other's work and also finding errors and things like that. So the general idea is we have teams of 4. So I think some of you may have walked in after I made this comment. We have one person who's remote. Her name is McHenry, and she is, that's one of the reasons why I'm sincerely hoping that this recording is working. And you said that you don't want to work in a group, so that gives us 16 people. And so the idea is that we have 4 groups of 4, and then for the first 2 assignments, you pair off in pairs. So there's not that much overhead if you're working with one other person. And then So that'll be the first two, and I've suggested that you can switch off. So your team, you can meet the other members of your team by switching who you're working with in a pair. And then for the third assignment, the revised vises and presentation assignment, then you come together as a group. So the idea is that for the first viz and the second visualization assignment, you're creating kind of a repository of visualizations about the topic, which is going to be crime in the city of Chicago, believe it or not. So I picked that because it's kind of neutral. It doesn't require that you have a lot of business background in any one area for that. Everybody is on an equal footing, more or less, for that. And it's an interesting data set to analyze. So you will work on that. So you make 2 visualizations for each pair each time. So that gives you a repertoire of 8 visualizations. And then you revise, once you come together as a main group, you revise them, pick out your best, and present them to the group. So you get some presentation experience with presenting visualizations. So it's always been something that I've regretted in this class is I give a lot of feedback on these visualizations. I find errors that people have, or I make suggestions on how they can make them better, but it doesn't necessarily end up that people then go back and actually fix it. And I think there's a huge amount of value in fixing because then you really pay attention to what the comments were. And they're usually things to fix. So the idea is that you bring your best and you present that to the class on that third assignment. Not necessarily that you create new ones, although if the 4 of you are sitting around and you're looking at your 8 visualizations and you all agree that none of them are any good at all, you want to make some more, that's okay too. So it's up to you to decide. So I'll be publishing more details about that assignment very soon so that you can get started on that. So and that's about as compressed. I mean, an assignment every week, visualization assignment each week starting after next week's class, so be prepared that that's a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of work for me to grade it as well. That I'm fully in the game for that. So in addition to that, so that takes up the first 5 of the 7 weeks of the class. Then at that same 5th week, I want to hold you accountable for some of the other material that we're going to be talking about, because this class is not just about visualization. So there is the second half of the class, after we do the vises, I have in mind a midterm exam, which is not full-blown as much as it would be if we're about everything, but it will be about certain selected topics that we're covering. So that's what I have envisioned for the midterm exam. Then for the next final 2 weeks, I want to have you complete a content quiz on some of the articles that we're reading, and probably have you do that before class. So you walk into class with more knowledge about that, because we're going to primarily be talking about case studies in those last 2 classes. And where we're headed for that is to understand kind of the flows of knowledge and visualizations in the larger context in organizations. So it's kind of an ambitious place to finish the class. Then the take-home final will be questions that are kind of a combination of anything that we've had throughout the semester. And I like to have a lot of participation in class. I'll learn your names, especially when we're doing the case studies. I keep track in my head during the course of the class and then make notes afterwards so that I can accurately reflect that. So if you just come to class and don't say anything ever, you can probably figure about, B- would be the grade that I would give for that, because that's kind of the ultra neutral grade, right? If you come in and you make a lot of valuable contributions to the class, you're always well prepared, you probably, you could get 100% of that grade. So that's pretty much the range that I would envision. If you're missing a lot of classes, which I suspect nobody will do, then you would fall below that 80% range on that. Okay, so that gives you an idea here. By the way, I already had an error in the syllabus on the due date of the take-home final, which I've corrected, but make sure that you keep up with the latest version in case I have to correct any errors. And if you find any errors, make sure that you let me know. So the Tableau software, this is the product key for you, so you can put it on your own laptops. For this lab, you don't need to. You can just use the computers in here. I don't think there's a whole lot of space, really. If you wanted to bring your laptop, I suppose you could stick it in between these other computers. But if you did, I wouldn't be opposed to that either. Know that sometimes just working with your own machine is easier than working with one of these. So it is a university license. It's not for commercial use, so please don't take your work data and immediately start analyzing it with Tableau unless you can make a legitimate case that you're going to, let's say, do a test batch of data that you want to show to your boss to get your boss to buy Tableau, something like that. I would see that would be a reasonable way to look at the license, but don't just start using it at work, because that would violate our license, and then we might eventually have consequences of that. Okay, I use the case method of teaching. I like to say a few words of why I use that method. As I say, we'll have about we'll have one case in the second half of class 3, and then a smaller case in class 4, and then in class 6 and 7 we'll have at least 3 cases. So there's a lot of research that's out there. Social scientists, business researchers, they have a ton of research that you can go and you can look at their hypotheses and their surveys and everything like that. Most business people could care less about that stuff, I'm guessing. And they've heard about some of it in school, but after that they kind of lose touch with it. But what do the business people really know about? They know about their own case histories, other people's cases. They love to hear the stories about what works and doesn't work. They walk around their organizations. People tell them what's going on. They're case studies, right? They're rich in detail. They embed a lot of knowledge. And so what I try to do in a class like this is I try to bring some of the research results into the class in a way that you can use them when you're analyzing cases, so that what happens is that you kind of embedded them in the way in your thinking about it. They're a lens of the way. And one of the main ones that I use is called the benefits dependency network. And just to show you how powerful that is, I'm not sure you'll believe me, but we had mentioned already a few weeks ago, Business Analytics Summit. We had 6 speakers, and I was in charge of trying to get the speakers to make consistent presentations across the 6 topic areas. So we had Cleveland Clinic, we had kind of a private analytics consulting firm, we had Smuckers, we had Progressive, we had Signet Jewelers, and probably one other that I'm forgetting. So I used that benefits dependency network, and I tried to make sure that each of the speakers addressed one of the 4 major areas as the primary focus of their presentation. And I'm telling you, it was one of the best conferences I've ever been at, because it was, a really, really good, the continuity was there, and the audience stayed. 350 people. If you've been at business conferences before, they start out, they drift away as the morning goes on. 12 noon, we had 350 people still in that room. So it's pretty exciting for that. So we'll try to bring a few of their things in, later in the class, if I can bring some of their slides in and talk about some of the stuff that they talked about also. So this only works, though, if the class is well prepared. So if you walk in and you haven't read the case, you're not familiar with the details, and everybody else is around you talking about all this stuff and you're really clueless, guess what happens? It's boring as heck for you, right? You've just sentenced yourself to sitting there not really knowing what's going on. So usually what happens is people will try to catch up, they'll try to read the case as much as they can during the class and maybe make some contributions. And if that's what happens, if your circumstances are that that's the only thing you can do, please do that. Don't stay home and miss the class. But it's better if you're well prepared when you come to class. Because, and this is my personal philosophy about what a manager is, being a manager is all about. So this may be redundant with things that you've heard from everybody else. But I think managers do 3 main things. They respond to the circumstances that are around them. They have to adapt to changing circumstances. So you need to have a repertoire of things that you do when you see certain circumstances that are around you. You need to be able to think of new things to do to adapt to the changing circumstances. And then you need to have the capability of persuading your team, the people around you, that you've come up with the right course of action for that. So respond, adapt, and persuade. And, why do you think someone like Bill Gates or Steve Jobs rose to the top? Because of their ability to persuade, even when they had a vision for the world that was radically different than many of the people around them. And so that's what I think. So how do you get that? You get that by studying cases of how people have done it or failures and things like that. You add to your repertoire that way. So I would like to see our business school use a lot more case method. But in any case, I try to use it as much as I can. Okay, so I mentioned already really about the midterm, the take-home final. On the take-home final, I use a format that I call a structured memo type of a format, which means that I give you a multiple choice question as if your boss wrote you something. Said, hey, I was thinking about what to do about this situation, and a couple of ideas came to mind, A, B, and C. What do you think about this? Which is the best? And then you would write a couple paragraphs back, and you would pick one of those, and you'd say, what's the justification? And your justification is using examples from the cases that we had, frameworks that we studied, anything that we talked about in the class using concepts. So it is a evidence-based way. Yes, Valerie.
To cases, if when we're writing that, I mean, if pull just refer to it.
Yeah, you can use a shortened referral method, something that's simply like a citation of the case with like a short version so I know what you're referring to. And if you have a quotation, use a page number or something like that. So it does not have to be a full-blown bibliographical reference. But I do have materials about plagiarism in the on the Brightspace, because it's not so much that I think that people in a class like this would be deliberately copying other people's material and just dumping them in, although I have seen that happen. But it's more that you're not aware of it, or you may come from a place where that wasn't something that was ever emphasized before. So we can talk about that more when we get closer to that moment in the class. Okay, the overall course plan. So this week I'm going to continue talking about the subjects of business intelligence, knowledge management, the introduction. I have a couple of major topics in more detail. Then next week we'll really hit the Tableau hard and hit it from the viewpoint of data modeling. I kind of want to build up your ideas of why does Tableau work the way it works, and what are the major flashpoints that people get wrong because they don't understand sort of what is the fundamental layer of what's going on in the package. And so I'll probably use a bunch of examples in class and have you do some exercises and things like that. So hopefully that'll be nice and interactive. And then the following week, you will have already turned in your first visualization exercises. I have you turn them in on Sunday. Then I grade them on the rest of the day on Sunday and Monday so that I can get them back to you in time for class on Tuesday. So that way we have something to talk about in Tuesday, and you have a basis for doing the next assignment, right? So that's why this course is very, I'm chained to you in the schedule of the class. To make the class work, you have to turn in your work on time. I have to grade your work on time. And so it can be tricky, but I make it work. Yes.
We have the first visualization due on the 10/27.
Right. Let's see. Is 10/29 is a Tuesday? So it would be Tuesday 29/28, right, 10/27. I also put incentives in it. Why? No, not 10/27. It's the next week after that. It's the 11/3.
Okay.
Right, right. It can't be 10/27 because I haven't even introduced Tableau yet,
Yeah,
right?
that's what on the syllabus.
Oh, does it say 10/27?
Yeah, that's what
Really?
It
All right, so this is the thing that I often do get my dates confused sometimes, so I'll make sure that I review that and get everything worked out. So I guess I scared you a little bit on that, right? Okay, thank you for pointing that out to me. Yeah, I'll review that and make sure that I have all the dates right for that. Anyway, so that's what's coming up in the next few weeks with the visualizations. Then, so we'll go over in class some of your successes and failures on that, or let's say things that you can improve. Talk about some more Tableau techniques, and then in the second half of those classes, we'll kind of continue on the business track of business intelligence And then after the midterm, we'll turn more towards the issue of knowledge management and do a bunch of case studies that will hopefully give us this more general view of where business intelligence fits in for the big picture. So that's the plan for the class. I don't really take attendance, but obviously I'm going to know who's here and who's not here. And if you're not here, you can't get a score for class participation for that day. Of course, if you have a valid reason for not being here, that just let me know. And I'm looking for quality rather than quantity in class. So if you're someone who you want to make sure that you get in, so you end up saying exactly the same thing that everybody else said, then I probably won't give you as much credit for your participation. So, but on the other hand, if you find yourself constantly thinking of something to say and then saying, oh man, why did that other person get in? I didn't get to say the thing that I wanted to say. Then make sure you get your hand up earlier, get in there. And I try to be very inclusive, so if someone has already contributed, I try to go to somebody else before I go back to that person so that there's not anybody who dominates. And I try to stop and say, okay, is there anybody who hasn't gotten in yet? So I try to make sure that I'm very inclusive. I do think that this size of this room and the way that we're situated here could actually be rather conducive for doing the cases. So it could be good. So a few other policies, I mentioned the plagiarism stuff. So, as again, I would not expect this, but I did have a case a few years ago where someone got the materials from a previous semester and turned in an assignment that was almost identical to something that another student had turned in. So there were some very severe consequences for that student. So, take it seriously. But I mean, the point is that if you don't do the work yourself, you're not going to get the benefit. It's like going to the gym. Right? If you went to the gym and said, I want to do an aerobic exercise, but then you paid someone to walk around the track while you sat there and enjoyed a beer, you're not going to get any benefit. And same thing with your brain, right? So don't shortchange yourself. If you find yourself up against the wall and, circumstances, life does happen, right? So talk to me about it. We'll try to work something out. I'd rather see you do that than have you take an action that you'll regret later on for that. So I do have a pretty severe penalty for late work. For this class especially, we're going to need to stay on time with that. I have a 2-week appeal. I don't know, maybe I should make that less for this class. It's so compressed, but that's currently what the policy is on that. These are my office hours. I know that might not be convenient for any of you, especially if you're working during the day, but those are times when you could reach me in my office, but I'm very available other times. So just call me, text me, email me. We'll figure something out for that. So any questions about the syllabus or anything that I've said so far? All right, so let's go ahead. Oh, yes, a question. Okay, great.
What's the rationale for presentations before the quiz on the midterm? You think that there's certain things that we might during the presentation?
No, it was really just because that's the only way I can conceivably figure out the timing of it. Now, so would you prefer to have the quiz before the presentations? Or can you think of another way that I can squeeze it in? Because I can't allocate another whole week to having a quiz, right? So.
No, I'm just thinking for myself. Personally, I would rather have the exam out of the way because I just feel that's tension. I don't think I'm in addition to anybody's presenting. Maybe that I have a quiz right after. I probably want to squeeze in a little more information.
Right, I see.
I was just wondering, except you think that we might learn some additional thing during the presentation that might help us during the exam.
Yeah.
Otherwise, personally, for myself, I'm not going to pay attention.
Right. No, that's a very valid point. And so, so this is something that I have not done before. So I'm open to suggestions. I could flip it around, or, I could say, let's have a time period for taking that quiz, which is within a day after that. And so we'll come and make the presentations, and then you'll take that quiz on your own, maybe within the next day or two, something like that. So there's a small separation between them. Would you think that would be a better solution?
That
It could be a.
or if it's going to be on the same day, maybe get the quiz out of the way
Okay. Well,
Go along with that.
okay. So again, that's the kind of thing, talk amongst yourselves and let me know. So I'm open. I'm not necessarily wedded to one way of doing it. So you can tell me what you think is going to work best for you. But the idea is there should be some kind of a quiz to hold you accountable, but at the same time, it does not necessarily have to be exactly the way I envisioned it a few weeks ago when I was doing the syllabus, or a few months ago. Okay, let's take our break. It's now 7:24, according to my little timing device here. So let's come back at 7:34 and we'll continue at that point.